Heading Home with Mike and Arif, and I am in Barrie. My co-host Arif Khan is in Montreal, and our guest today is Ontario Real Estate Association CEO Tim Hudak, who is in Toronto. So we're all over the place. And how are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing great, Mike. Arif, good to see you both. Thanks for having me back on Hitting Home. I like your backgrounds. I'm thinking, Mike, that's a neighborhood that you might be selling in right now. And Arif, I don't know what that is. That looks like a science fiction, like Dr. Doom meets real estate. What is that all about?
It's a Ralph Steadman.
It does a bit of this, doesn't it? And I mean, it might be a sign of the times, whether you're looking at cryptocurrency or whether you're looking at the stock market, inflation. It could be representative of a whole number of things. But to bring some sanity to all of this, what's going on in the markets today, we're thrilled to have you on, a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the real estate economy for sure. So glad to have you here, Tim.
Oh, my pleasure to be back.
I'm going to ask you right off the bat, we're hearing the word cooling with reference to our real estate market more and more these days, and it's a long overdue cooling if it is in fact happening, and it seems to be taking place throughout the province, getting a little quieter on the buyer's side. The inventory levels of homes seems to be creeping up in different markets, and again, long overdue as far as I'm concerned. Our federal government has attempted a number of policy things and stunts, some of them I would call, to try to cool the market down across Canada here. Do you think any of those things are responsible for the cooling that we're seeing right now?
Not really. First of all, it is good to have a bit of a breather. There's no doubt about that. But I do believe that we're going to see continuing of demand outpacing supply. I'm glad to get into the reasons for that. But I think, one of the advantages I have in my job is as a CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association is talking to leading realtors like yourself, Mike, right across the province in big cities and small towns. So this is happening everywhere. I think there's been a bit of a step back by buyers when, interest rates went up and therefore mortgage rates would go up with it, some cost of living issues. Mm-hmm. But we still have, millennials getting in the marketplace, are at an age now where they're getting promoted, having families. You got the bank of mom and dad, the boomers who are helping finance those moves. The economy, I think, is actually doing pretty well, all things considered. Immigration coming back, like all those demand indicators are there. So we have a breather for now. I still think we're going to see demand outpacing supply until we solve the essential issue. That's getting more supply in the marketplace.
Yeah. Tim, I got a question for you, though, based on what you just talked about there. Is it fair to respectfully, of course, compartmentalize some of the people who are impacted by this move into a couple of different categories? Those who are leaving or have recently left the GTA for areas that to them, even though the prices have gone up based on trends, obviously, it's still potentially a cash purchase from them, or maybe a much smaller mortgage and percentage of the overall purchase to them. So they're not as impacted by sort of what others are facing and trying to get into the market, as well as those who are coming in as new Canadians or immigrants into the country. Again, they're coming potentially with cash in hand versus those of us who are trying to get into the market, maybe within the same market that we were in a few years ago, and it's much tougher to get in. Are there two different types of perspectives?
That's a very fair point. There's certainly, we have seen the phenomenon for some time of people who live in Toronto, then go to places like Barrie or Niagara, where I'm from, and you can sell a pretty modest home in Toronto and get, an estate in a smaller town. And at OREA, and you can see all of our studies online at orea.com, we did see an increase of that interest during the pandemic and near the end of the pandemic, hopefully I can say end, where there was a greater interest for more space, larger yards, and to get out of the city. We are, however, seeing demand return in urban areas. But I think Arif make a good point. Like, if you grew up in Barrie or Orillia or in Fort Erie like myself, you always thought that if you played by the rules, you went to school and, got a degree, you saved up a few pennies, well, more than that, but you saved up a few dollars, that you could afford a home in the neighborhood you grew up in. But that is no longer the case right across the province of Ontario, unfortunately, until we get more supply in place.
Yeah. And as far as industry associations go within the province here, I don't think you'll find one that is more frontline and more engaged than the Ontario Real Estate Association. And, we're in constant communication with the province. We do have a provincial election coming up. Maybe you could bring us up to date on some of the things that AREA is doing with regards to housing and the housing crisis, with consideration for the upcoming election and those ears that we want to reach out there. What are some of the things that are happening right now?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Mike. I mean, a big part of what we do at AREA is high impact advocacy to fight for homeowners and those who want to join their ranks. I mean, we wake up every day thinking, how do we help create that next generation of Canadian homeowners? So we've engaged heavily at the province. I'm happy to talk about some of the victories we've had. 2 pieces of legislation focused on increasing housing supply on homes people can actually afford. But very importantly now, we're in the middle of an election campaign. We just had the provincial debate. We've met with the leaders of all the political parties. We put our own plan on the table. It's called A Home for Everyone. You can see it at ahomeforeveryone.info. And we hope to see them talk about that in the campaign and then solve the issues together afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the candidates, there's still a bit more time for them to touch base with the public here and with through the media and however they're communicating with us. Do you think they're giving enough attention to the housing there among all the other issues that they want to bring to the forefront in their platforms? Is housing getting the attention it deserves?
Well, I'll tell you, it's the highest profile I've seen of housing in provincial election in my time in public life. I spent 21 years in the Ontario legislature and now just past 5 at AREA. And I can tell you, it's obviously usually housing, it's usually healthcare, education, the economy, those types of issues, crime sometimes. I've never seen housing this high on the radar screen, probably top 2 or 3 issues. All the parties have put out detailed platforms, like I've never seen political parties talk about around housing. A lot of that comes from our work and our realtor leaders to put ideas on the table. But mostly it's those folks out there who go from home to home, make an offer, lose out, get frustrated, go to another one, dream where the cradle's going to go or what the backyard is going to look like. And they're demanding of the politicians, we need more housing opportunities, particularly for starter homes and move up homes.
So we've got a scenario, though, where on a different topic, obviously, but when politicians turn to the experts in any field and look for guidance and then ignore that advice because there's a campaign or because it doesn't meet their agenda or because maybe they don't have the capability or the capacity to address it truly, you can look at an example. We had the SARS report sit on the shelf collecting dust for years and years and years, and then you walk into a pandemic completely unprepared and you're surprised that the public's not happy with you. You've got associations who have been providing advocacy to government for years, yourself at the forefront, providing informative, information to help them make the right decisions, help them make the right choices. You met with every single party. Yes, it's in their platform, but is it going to come to fruition? That's the question that I want to know. Are they actually going to take the advice from industry experts such as yourself?
Yeah, I do believe that will happen. And one of the reasons is because some of the work already has happened. There's a number of ideas we put on the table that now have been enacted. We actually did have the biggest increase in housing being built in our province in 2021 than we had for 30 years, Arif. So some progress there. We have a ways to go. And here's why I also feel optimistic about that. People are demanding it. And you make a good point about, a SARS report and it goes on the shelf and people kind of forget about it. But this is day-to-day life for people, right? There's nothing more important of something you own than your home. It's a smart investment. You know that from your finance background. It pays off over time. But it's where we raise our families. It's where we're most comfortable, can truly be ourselves. It's a place of our fondest memories. And it's part of the Canadian culture to buy a home and then benefit from a retirement, or when you sell it to move up to a larger one when the kids get bigger. I think it's so important to everyday families. I do feel confident they'll keep the politicians' feet to the fire and get something done.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is just the simple fact that what's good for the public with regards to housing and real estate is good for the realtor as well. If the economy is good, people are in a good position, they're buying homes. If people are buying homes, realtors are comfortable with their living. So I do see through the public when we try to champion a cause, ideally for the public, some of the, the negative blowback might be that, well, of course, realtors want that because they just want their business to be good. But it's twofold. But I think when we approach the province, it's genuinely out of concern for the public as a whole, because in addition to being realtors, we are homeowners too. We have children who want to get into the housing market as well. So there's a genuine, legitimate need and desire to see our real estate economy healthy.
There's one thing I really like doing, Mike, and I probably did it with you and other leading realtors too, is tell me a little bit about, the first time you helped a first-time buyer get a new home. Yeah. And realtors' faces light up, right? Nothing makes an Ontario realtor happier than helping that first-time buyer get a place of their own that they can actually call home. And that really motivates our realtor members across the province to help get more Canadian homeowners. And the last point I'll add on that too is not only that's good realtor motivation, but they want stronger communities. And you just mentioned that, when you sell, or when somebody buys a home, they tend to reinvest in the home, fixing it up a little bit, new furniture, appliances, renovations. The average spin-off from a home sale in Ontario is about $90,000 in the economy. So if you want to keep the economy strong, I challenge you to find any other product that people buy that have a bigger spin-off effect in more variety of jobs across our province.
And I think I can say with certainty that, after 20 years in the business, my longest relationships with past clients would be with those ones who I helped to buy into their first home. And there's something magical about it. And a real bond is formed there that continues on.
In terms of buying into the first home, though, I think we'll all agree that it is a different challenge, a challenge like never before for first-time home buyers to get in. And when you look at all of the constraints and regulations that have taken place over the last decade, if not longer, in terms of getting into the home, I think they are having to be a lot more creative in terms of and more broad in their approach about what is the first home. Are you buying your forever home right off the bat? Are you buying the home that you can get into so that you can leverage some appreciation to get into the next one? What are you looking at? What are first-time home buyers looking at, Tim, that they've never looked at before?
Well, that's why I'll reinforce it's important to work with a real estate professional, your realtor, who can give you that advice, who knows all the options and knows the neighborhood cold and where things are going to help with that first choice. The biggest thing in our surveys we find from first-time buyers is not really a fear about the mortgage payments. It's really, how do you have enough for the down payment to get that home? Because as you both know, once you get your foot on the first rung of the real estate ladder, it's much easier to move up than it is to get there in the first place. Yeah, I mentioned earlier our policy platform, this election campaign, and again, it's called A Home for Everyone, and it's a homeforoveryone.info. And in there, we talk about first-time buyers particularly. For example, we want to double at least the first-time home buyer rebate from the land transfer tax. That will help them get that foot into the marketplace. And secondly, there are new tools available, new financial technologies to help finance that down payment to begin with. Perhaps a company, it's like a new rent-to-own policy where a pension fund, an investor, even the government can help you the down payment, and then you pay it off down the road when you sell the home. That's a new tool other places use, but red tape keeps out in Ontario. We want that fixed to give a new option to buyers.
Tim, so what I'd love to do right now is when we come back from the break, Mike, we do have to go to break real quick, but let's come back and explore some more of the, what tools and incentives that were there yesterday still work, which ones are no longer relevant, and how should government be looking at this challenge with a new set of lenses? If we can pick up on that when we come back from the break, that'd be fantastic. But right now we've got Ontario Real Estate Association CEO Tim Hudak with us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we'll be right back with more from him right after this break. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We have as our guest Tim Hudak, the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association. And we do have a provincial election coming up. The province is vital to dealing with our challenges here in Ontario with housing affordability and housing availability. And we're just bouncing around some of the ideas and some of the actions that are taking place to deal with these issues. And one of the things that I've heard you mention different talks, Tim, is the possibility of creating incentives for developers. And before I say that, I just would say that there are two. They're not separate; they're intertwined. But there's two distinct things. There's dealing with the Ontario resident, young buyers, and everything, and helping them, enabling them to be able to purchase any way we can. But the other concerns is then providing the stock, the housing stock that we need. So when they are prepared to go in, there's something there for them to buy. And those are two different things that require different approaches, I suppose. And again, back to the incentives for developers. A lot of the public would say, well, developers have deep pockets as it is. Why should we be helping them? But if the housing isn't being built at the level we need, is that one thing you truly think we should be doing, creating incentives, and how would that look?
Yeah, you bet. So, I truly believe that if you don't set goals and measure your outcomes, you're just practicing. So how does that play in here? I had the honor of sitting on the province's housing affordability task force. We met back in January. We tabled a report. You guys probably have talked about it. And we said we need to create 1.5 million more homes over the next 10 years in our province. And why that level, Mike and Arif? Well, number one, we have a growing population. We talked about that earlier on immigration and millennials. But also there's a big factor that's catch up. We actually built fewer homes in the 2000s than we did in the 1970s. Right? That's just nuts. So no wonder we have a problem with supply today. And I'm happy to say that all four political parties, Liberals, PCs, and Democrats, Green, they all put that goal in the platform. So number one accomplishment there. We did talk there about how do you get supply. I'm happy on a lot of details, but here's some things we mean, by incentives. It's not really cash on the table. It's more or less cleaning up the red tape, the hassle, the runaround, the delays that drive up prices and put them out of reach of the average family. Here's one example. We found in the city of Toronto that there was a project. It was going to be a nice condo building, affordable units for people to buy. And there was a shadow that fell into a park only on a couple of days a year, I think around the equinoxes, believe it or not, or something to the sun. And it was a 6.5% shadow in the park. But the red tape meant they had to knock down, they had to take off, I'm trying to think of this, and I think 8 or 9 stories off of that tower, eliminated units, including 22 targeted affordable units, all for this red tape. We found in other communities, I believe York Region, before you can put a shovel in the ground, the cost of the fees and the permits and all that was $150K before you even move any dirt. So that's the type of red tape, hassle, and nickel and diming that adds up and pushes prices out of reach for an average family.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't know. Some days in the summer, you put a premium on shaded real estate.
Mike, I think there's an opportunity here to underline and highlight that last point that you made, Tim, is that those fees and that red tape directly impact the person right now who's suffering most, which is the person who's trying to actually get into the home ownership. That's $150,000 of prevented. What would you call that? Talk about digging a hole and trying to get back to zero. Before you can even get to zero, you're in the hole $150,000 just there.
Yep, exactly. I'll go on a couple more examples that if you like. We found that NIMBY forces have become so strong. In fact, there's a new acronym. It's called BANANA. BANANA stands for build absolutely nothing near anyone. It seems to have gotten that ridiculous. But we heard, from builders that there's a merry-go-round that happens, that they'll go in to see all the different departments at City Hall or the county and the province. And then along the way, often municipal councillors will interfere in a project and the merry-go-round goes again and again. And by the time you get off, it could be up to 10 years later and prices have gone through the roof. So we said we should streamline that process and set hard dates and limit the number of public hearings that happen to what's in the legislation, because a lot of projects get strangled, death by committee.
Yes, and that's exactly what we had a representative, high up representative of our municipal council here a few weeks ago, and I was biting my lip because he was saying that we have over 20,000 units approved for build here in Barrie where nothing is happening, no shovels in the ground, no anything. And he shrugged his shoulders, says, I have no idea why. And right away, and I didn't bring it up, but my thoughts went to, okay, well, that proposal, each of those separate proposals for those 20,000 accumulative units comes before council. The gallery's filled with the not in my backyard crowd. Council sitting there intimidated by that, chant that's coming from there, from, that little narrow wedge of the community, neighbors who just don't want to see that development. So the proposal for, let's say it was 40 units, gets scaled down to 20 units. The developer walks away with his revised proposal, realizing the numbers just don't work anymore. Now I'm sitting on a parcel of land I can do nothing with, but I do have a proposal that's been approved. That is what we're seeing there. And if we see so many projects being downscaled to the point where they're just not buildable anymore, that's a big part of the problem. That's just buried 20,000 users. What is that quantitatively across the province? And it leads me to my question here, and I've thrown this out a couple times, and just throw it out for consideration. We do have a process for approvals, and much of that lies with the municipality. If it can't be resolved there, it then moves to the provincial level. But do you think that process needs to be revised and streamlined, and maybe some or more of that power put in the hands of the province, where there's less bias and less intimidation by the NIMBYs? Do you think that could be part of the solution?
Yeah, no, you're right on there, Mike. I think you need a combination of carrots and sticks. I'll start with the carrots. One of the things that we propose in our homeforeveryone.info that was also in the Housing Task Force's report is a housing building fund. And here's how it would work. Every provincial budget or federal budget, there's an infrastructure fund, right? For roads and sewers and transit and the rec center. How about this? If there's a municipality that's doing a really good job of helping create more homes people can afford, they're welcoming new neighbors, their sons and daughters can actually find a place in the community they want to live in, reward them. Their big project for transit or the rec center goes to the top of the list. Right. But if a municipality closes its doors, it just listens to NIMBY forces, says they don't want new neighbors, they put up walls, well, their project goes to the bottom of the list until they clean up their act. I think that juicy carrot would reward good behavior and punish bad. And
where would the directive have to come for that? I guess from the province.
Yeah, and hopefully the national government would follow that, but it come from the province, where basically they can set targets and say, city is this large, you got this much space, you should hit approximately this many units. And if they get there, reward them. Now on the sticks side, you need that too, because if, as you mentioned, Mike, they delay things forever to try to sabotage a project, have hearing after hearing, or have demands that look like they're just frivolous or vexatious, they appeal to the tribunal just to waste everybody's time and hopefully drive the builder away because it becomes too expensive. Well, there should be fees for that. There should be legislated timeframes for each step, so you can't drag out delays. And if you send things to the appeal court, the Ontario Land Tribunal, that are shown to have no merit whatsoever, they should be able to assign costs back to the municipality or whoever brought that forward, these cases.
And it should be standardized across the province rather than each municipality having their own.
Well, one thing that I don't know that the average person takes into consideration is the fact that, at the time with that bare parcel of land, the developer is paying a minimum amount of taxes in comparison, and they can just wait out a council. I mean, if it's going to be 1 year or 2 years or 4 years, they're going to wait out the council until maybe there's a change in leadership within that municipality. And quite often, I'm not going to say in every scenario, that developer may be sitting on a parcel of land in more than one jurisdiction, and they can just redirect their resources and their focus to the other one to work with a more collaborative council. And the only people who lose are the residents, and in that fact that the municipality may not recognize that they're losing out.
Can I add to that a little bit on the builder time? So we did speak about also putting a burden on the builders. So let's say there's a builder there who's gone through all the approvals processes. They're ready to go, but they just sit on the land because they want to speculate for housing prices to go even higher. We did suggest in our report from the task force there should be a tax on that. And I'm happy to say that both the Liberals and the Democrats put that in their election platforms. They call it use it or lose it. Again, you've gone through all the processes, all the boxes are ticked, and you're still not building. Well, there should be a tax on that. And the PCs put in their platform, this probably drives you guys crazy because you fight for your clients. When they build a condo project and then all of a sudden they cancel it after a couple of years of delay, and the people who bought into the project are left on the hook, they get their money back with like no interest. So they're also going to go after those condo developers that try to shrug off their commitments to get higher prices down the road to keep them honest. Those are both promising developments.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a very necessary piece of potential legislation, I guess is what I guess we refer to it. I guess it's not legislation yet. So question for you though, Tim, who's in the hot seat really at the moment? Is it the incumbent? Is it the candidates who are vying for that position? You mentioned in the initial segment here today that the current government has done more in the last couple of years than in recent terms by previous government. So who's actually in the hot seat? Does the public have a long enough memory to remember what things were like pre-COVID? Because gosh, COVID, I can't see, I would not have wanted to be premier during COVID. I don't know anybody who would have gotten it perfect. And it's a terrible spot for any premier in any province to have been in. But who's truly in the hot seat, and who's the public going to align with?
Yeah, there's that old expression: a week is a lifetime in politics. I think like a day is a lifetime in a campaign, right? So they could go badly off the rails, and your momentum changes like that. But I will say that all four parties have put out ideas that you will find in homeforeveryone.info. That's good. We will be doing an analysis near the end of the campaign for people who want to vote on real estate issues that shows where each of the parties stands. You want to have me back or just talk about it on a future show, please do so. We're crunching all of that.
For sure.
And there are some things that are in platforms that we don't like, for example, taking away the right of how you sell your home and forcing everybody, into an auction style. Well, we don't like that. We think you should have a choice, a traditional offer process. There's some new taxes that are proposed. I don't think you can tax your way to affordability. No. But on the positive side, each of the parties does have good ideas to increase housing supply and choice.
What's your thoughts on open bidding on that note there?
I'm going to let you hold that thought just for a second. We do have to go to break, but Mike, great question. First question out of the gate when we come back on the other side of this break with CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association, Tim Hudak, joining us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Tim Hudak, CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association. Glad to have you on. Just before break, we touched on the topic of auction style or blind bidding. And go ahead.
So I fundamentally believe, and we at AREA, that your home is your most precious asset, that it means so much to you on a personal level because of the memories, and it's your home, for goodness sakes. And second, you're counting on it for your next move, whether that's to buy a bigger home or to provide for some dignity in retirement. And that's why we don't think the government should tell you how you sell your home. If you want to use a traditional offer process, some people call that blind bidding, you should. If you want to use an auction, you should. If you want to sell it to your cousin, or you want to sell it to that young couple that remind you of yourselves when you bought the house, that should be your right. Government should not tell you how to sell your home. Let me give you some quick background on this. The reason that realtors can't share the details of offers is not something that realtors invented. That's the law. And the reason that's the law by the government of Ontario is that next to your health information, your personal financial information is pretty sensitive. Do you want a bunch of strangers to know how much you can pay for a home, how much you can afford for a deposit? Do you have to sell your home, right? When can you close? If you really want to share that with strangers, you can opt in, but it shouldn't be forced. And any kind of process that shares that information is by definition an auction. So let's not make a big mistake here. Auctions tend to drive up prices even higher because
ego gets involved.
There you go, right? In Australia, New Zealand, as you gentlemen know, they have auctions not because they're forced to, because buyers choose them because it drives up prices because the egos get going and you drive up the costs. So we at AREA have said, let's put a new model on the table, a fully transparent model, opt in because it is your personal sensitive financial information. And then you can share the details around the table and have the benefit of the advice of the realtor to keep you calm. But give people choices, don't take them away.
Mm-hmm. And I think often the policy that's brought forward is maybe to take the focus off the real problem and to point fingers. And one example of that is I've heard an MP recently this week, and I've even heard our Prime Minister say that, suggest that a 2-year ban on some types of foreign real estate investment is needed here, because that is one of the key problems that's driving prices up is foreign investment. But foreign investment makes up less than 3% of the real estate purchases in Canada. It's not the problem. Again, we are all in agreement that it's supply that is at root of the problem here.
And that's the thing. That's the thing that kind of gets me going is why is it that we are all on the same page, and that doesn't seem to be resonating. That really the answer is in removing the red tape and putting aside, not giving the platform to those who will object to anything, the banana crowd, as you mentioned, Tim, and then really just addressing supply. So on that note, though, one of the challenges that hasn't been brought up is that when you get into the auction style or when you get into bidding, one of the greatest challenges that people have seen, certainly from the buyer's perspective, is they will go in with emotions run high and facts really on the low side of their decision making. And then they find themselves in trouble with the bank trying to get the financing because the bank said, well, that's really nice that you outbid your competition by $300,000 and you're purchasing at 130% of value, but we're only going to give you 80% of actual value. Now we've got a disparity there.
Yeah, Arif, it's a great point. And that's why it's so important to work with your real estate professional. And secondly, even though you had the dream last night about how the new house is going to work out and you can raise your family, you need to keep a level head and have somebody at your side you can trust that looks out for your long-term interests. So
one of the things that are on the table, though, as well, the province just recently announced that they may be revisiting the stress test.
That would be helpful because the stress test is a one-size-fits-all straitjacket. And I totally get it. You want to make sure, just like Arif, the example you gave, that people don't pay more than they can afford. At the same time, when you have a one-size-fits-all solution, it can work against certain groups of people. Do you need a stress test in every market? It does work against entrepreneurs, for example. Does it make sense to have a stress test if you're refinancing your mortgage and you've successfully met all of the payments? So if they're looking at modernizing it, making it more flexible for the individual situation, we're all for that. And in fact, have called for just that.
Yeah. Last time we had you on the show, Tim, and it's been some time. I think it was maybe close to a year now. We talked quite a bit about what was a fairly new project, I guess you would call it, by AREA, and it was the Small Towns, Big Opportunities white paper that was put together by AREA and presented to the province. And I think it's probably one of the most significant proposals put together and presented to the province that we've seen in the last 10 years. And so I just wanted to follow up with you on that because there was a number of great recommendations within that. Was it well received by the province? And, now that we've had some time with it, would you say that the province has embraced it and is putting some of those things into practice? Or?
Yeah, a lot of good came out of it. Thank you for remembering that because we believe that the small town revival is underway. Also the fact that they're great places to live, but also, work from home and some changes from COVID has made it even more desirable in the eyes of many people. So a couple of things that we've seen progress on in that Small Towns, Big Opportunities. And you can see that again at orea.com, orea.com. We talked about expanding natural gas across our province as a heating source and also helps fuel jobs, particularly in agriculture. Mission accomplished. The province announced some major movements forward on expanding natural gas access to smaller towns. Number two, the biggest question, well, Mike, I'm sure you get this too in some of your area, the realtors now getting small towns is no longer how are the doctors or how is the healthcare, it's how's the internet service, right? Like that's gone through the roof. So we said to expand access to high-speed internet across our province, and billions of dollars directed that way. And third, we said, in some smaller towns, they may have an old industrial base and the old manufacturing job had moved on. How about a Brownfields tax credit to redevelop that land for jobs and for homes? And the province didn't go the full distance, but at least met us halfway with new tax incentives to redevelop commercial industrial properties for more job creation. Well, you see more on the housing side too.
Yeah, I've been beating that drum for years. Yeah,
it's like you're reading my notes here, but I'm going to jump right on that though. For years, many leaders have suggested that, and maybe it's a way of gaining traction from the electorate and in fact the taxpayers, but that growth should pay for growth. But every example that you just said there is about the need for those of us or those who are in a position of influence to plant seeds of investment. At the end of the day, we all know that if you overbid on your house by $100,000, wait 5 minutes, it's going to catch up. What's the difference between that and investing in the internet or in the infrastructure or in the brownfield, gentrification and soil reclamation? Is that not an investment that would pay huge dividends within no time whatsoever?
Yeah, well said. We have to create, more places for people to live in, to work, and they're going to be affordable to average families. And if we had that attitude that growth strictly pays for growth and no ifs, ands, or buts, we still be living in caves, right? We never would have built the 400 or the 401, or last century, we never would have electrified the developments. You have to make those initial investments to open up more opportunities for people, help make life more affordable, and create more homes and jobs.
All of us should be investing. I mean, there was a point where that growth pays for growth scenario was significant because we had fallen behind on our infrastructure with all the growth through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But we're in a whole different place right now. And I think our investment in our real estate future needs to come from a broader base. It has to come from all of us. And
Mike, I think
unfortunately, within our community at least, that's the mantra. Growth should pay for growth. And I think it's more of a deterrent than an incentive. But
I do think, Mike, and I'm sure you'll agree, I do think that people think in segments and compartments and in silos still, and they think, oh, your city's going to invest $10 million in cleaning up some soil. Why aren't you going after the big bad corporation that left us? Well, the corporation's gone and they've been gone for 30 years and there's nobody to go after. Oh, but my taxes are going to go through the roof because there's $10 million. Or that investment is going to pay dividends. That investment's going to bring in tax dollars. That investment's going to bring in economic growth, small business. It's going to create supply that will help temper the escalation in housing prices. How do we, Tim, at the door, as any one of the major parties that's knocking, and maybe even the more independent parties or representatives who are knocking on doors, is that not something that they should be getting buy-in from the electorate and really putting sails in their wind in their sails, or sails in their wind?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the challenges too that we face at the municipal level is that, councillors will always be focused on existing voters, but they don't know who's going to be moving in. And as a result, it's easier to resist projects or say no or make up excuses than bring them in. And that's why I think we have to broaden the focus of the community as a whole. And I'll go back to my point around infrastructure funds. And I think if the province were to say there's a reward for growth, that will help councillors focus on the big picture, making the community a better place to live as a whole, as opposed to looking at the little picture, Arif, that you just described.
Yeah, I'll jump around a little bit here, Tim. And, with housing prices as high as they've become, it's increased the need to be innovative, to think differently with regards to, financing and investment in homes, but also in the built form of homes, the project. You've talked on this. Stick build, which is essentially wood framed buildings versus concrete and steel. Talk a little bit about that, whether you'd like to see some changes with regards to the regulation over stick built.
Yeah, it's a great question. We have huge potential in wood frame buildings to actually build safe buildings that are more affordable to the homeowner or the condo owner, and also good for the environment. And by the way, it keeps a lot of jobs in the province of Ontario through our forestry sector as well. So this is one of those happy areas where OREA pushed for higher stories for wood frame buildings. The Housing Affordability Task Force also pushed to it, going from the 6-story cap we have today up to 12. It's happening in British Columbia, a number of states. So we think we should do that in the province of Ontario and bring affordability closer to home as a result.
And that's been tested. We can do 12 stories and the integrity and structural strength is still there. I guess it must have been tried and is working in other jurisdictions outside of Ontario. Am I right?
Absolutely. Across North America and many other countries have been doing this for some time, very safely. I think sometimes in Ontario, we're a bit small C conservative. Well, there's a law here and It must be there for a reason. When other jurisdictions have done it, they've helped keep costs under control that way, created new jobs, and benefited the environment. It's high time we did it as well.
So I will just, not to play the devil's advocate, but just ask the question for getting some clarity out there. There's obviously some concern around the ability for a fire department to get there. And, it's assumed that concrete doesn't burn, so to speak. And so there's some concern there, as well as also, is it time tested? Will it stand for 100 years? And I'm going to guess that it's not just the stick. The stick creates the skeleton or the frame, but it's also what you clad it in and what you insulate it with and what you protect it with for fire retardant or whatever. Does that address the concern of those who would be concerned about, fire safety at 12 stories?
Well, we went to the 6 stories, and it's been a real success for, it was when I was in the provincial legislature, so maybe about 10 years now. And I can understand, RF, why you might want to be the first adopter to go higher than 6. But when you see that it's been the reality in a lot of other jurisdictions that we compare ourselves to, and those problems have not actually happened, I think it's time to go forward.
Fantastic. Tim, Mike, you know what? I've definitely enjoyed this conversation. We want to thank you so much for joining us. Final thoughts, parting thoughts before you take your leave from us.
Well, if you get a chance, talk to your candidates, whatever parties, about what we can do about housing affordability, because I bet a lot of your viewers are in that boat where their daughter did everything right. She went to Georgian, she got a good job, she's looking for a home, but she can't find one she can afford in her home community. We've got a plan to do so, push the parties to do that as well. And of course, their moms and dads who love their sons and daughters dearly, but wouldn't mind them moving out of the basement and get the place of their own. Yeah. Talk to your politicians, make it happen by election day.
Thank you, Tim. We're happy for all you and Aria do with regards to, our housing in Ontario. It's our number one investment. I mean, home is where the heart is, and everybody needs to see us move to a place where all of us have a chance to participate. And hope to see you over the summer, and hope you have a good summer. And
we do have to go to break, but stay with us on the other side. Mike and I are going to come back with some final thoughts, and of course, we've got that added segment where we put a bit of a spotlight on a well-deserving member of our community. But Tim, thank you very much on our behalf, and I will remember banana from now on as opposed to NIMBY. I will use that; it just has a nicer ring to it. But thanks for joining us on the show. We'll see you again, Tim.
Good to see you both. Thanks for the work that you do. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Mike, it was great to see Tim Hudak once more. He's been a regular with us over the years, but this time we are going into election mode, and it was really good to hear the perspective that he brings from industry and advisors, and good to hear that he's been speaking with the different leaders of the different parties. Thoughts on the show so far, Mike?
Yeah, well, in his position as the Ontario Real Estate Association CEO, he can't be choosing up horses in this race. He's got to keep an open mind. What he does personally is his business, but professionally, whoever fills that seat after the election, he's going to have to work with them. And our association does work well with the province. And we're certainly forthright with our opinions and advice and recommendations, and oftentimes or sometimes they're well received and they're acted upon. Other times they're not. I have to say, regardless of where you sit politically, this past term of office provincially, this government has received us as well as any other that I've seen in the past 20 years with regards to our recommendations. With regards to real estate in the province.
One of the things I will say, though, Mike, is that there are a number of politicians they don't get as much time as they would like to in their local ridings. But one thing is for sure, an industry association such as OREA and other industry associations who have their agents and their representatives, boots on the ground in the homes and at the kitchen table on the daily basis. You better believe that he's bringing with him as a representative to those different political parties. He's bringing with him the most current and up-to-date information and perspective, and really the tone of of the electorate. He's bringing that to the table. And I was really refreshed to hear him not tiptoe around many of the crucial topics, being, well, one, that housing affordability is the number one item on people's minds on a daily basis. And two, it's time to get rid of and rethink and reconsider some of the legacy thinking and legacy policy that just simply doesn't serve us today. My favorite, of course, is the one that we brought up towards the end. Growth does not, has not, never did, and never will pay for growth. I don't care who's saying it. I'm not hearing a lot of it on the in any of the platforms. I'm not reading about it. I'm not hearing about it. And I think it better be something that is discussed. Thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, well, it is at that municipal level where we hear that mantra most often. Certainly in Barrie we have. And as I suggested before, there was a time in our recent history where that made good sense, that we had fallen far behind in the infrastructure. There were open fields in the midst of subdivisions that were earmarked for parks or ambulance stations or schools that weren't getting done because the funding was not there. And our city council and staff looked at this and went, well, we need to get the developers putting the money forward to make sure this stuff happens simultaneously and not 10, 20 years later or not at all. But in doing so, it's just added one more layer of cost to developers. And they're looking at Barrie and they're looking around Southern Ontario. Where am I going to invest? Where do I want to build? And they see a municipality where, that's equal in every other regard, except it's going to cost us X number of dollars more because we have to front the bill for all this infrastructure.
Yeah, Mike, we're living the mistakes. Yeah. We're living the mistakes of those who wanted to deliver 0% tax increases or whatever it may be. And listen, I'm not pro tax increase by any means, but what we're living is the mistakes of, well, now we've got the subdivision and then later we build the community center. Later we build the roads. Later we look at
2 to 3 times more.
2 to 3 times. There has never been a time in history where it was cheaper to build something 20 years later. It just doesn't happen that way. So, Mike, one of the listen, I was thrilled to have him on. I look forward to hearing from him again. Maybe if we get a recap after the election and we can see who hedged their bets or who had the better crystal ball. I'm not going to make a prediction today. I don't think that's our place, but I would like to have that conversation with him afterwards. Something that we've been doing, though, Mike, something we've been doing for the last period of time is wanting to redirect attention away from ourselves, away from the show, and maybe away from some of politics, and shine the spotlight on somebody who's been in our community, giving, whether it's recently or for their entire lifetime, but making our community and our neighborhood a better place to live. We had this conversation before the show, and I think we both agreed hands down that the recognition for the Good Citizen Award should go to a gentleman who, Mike, you and I are both sad to have noted he's no longer with us, someone who recently passed, but a gentleman who was truly instrumental in this community on a number of fronts. Tom Mcbride recently succumbed to his long battle with cancer. And Tom was known to many in the community, certainly in Barrie and Simcoe County, as having had a major role to play in so many of the incredible things in our community, starting with, if you will, I don't know if it's ironic or not, but he played a huge role in getting Gilda's place to the place that it is today, having helped raise, I believe, upwards of $3.5 million towards the running and the formation of Gilda's place. Yeah.
And it's an important foundation within our community. They do a lot. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Gilda's Place, it helps families dealing with cancer, going through cancer, who are at the hospital. They provide resources for those people and support at a very trying time for families.
Absolutely, and I apologize to Gilda's Club because it is Gilda's Club, so apologies there. But he was instrumental in that, and for a good period of time. But he was also one of the members of the Planned Giving Council of Simcoe County. And you know, for reference, Mike, I'm not making this up. I didn't know all of it up, but I did, grabbing it from a local newspaper article. I believe it was Buried Today, who summed it up really nicely. He was also involved in bringing the McLaren Arts Center to what it is today, and I believe he served as the president of board of directors there, as well as on the board of governors at Georgian College. So, and again, I think we are in election mode right now, and Tom Mcbride was certainly instrumental in helping the election, find the election of or re-election of a number of prominent figures within our community as well. He was certainly a force to be reckoned with there.
Yeah, and he was involved with the Barrie Chamber of Commerce for quite some time, I understand too.
Absolutely. So Tom is somebody who, may have had a lower profile in terms of the fact that he was not somebody to take the spotlight and to spend too much time in the spotlight. But in fact, he was somebody who was instrumental, orchestrating behind the scenes, gathering people, inspiring people to act, collaborating with people to see good things done. And if I could sum him up the way I knew him, is it was more important to get the outcome that we were looking for than to get the credit for the outcome that we were looking for. And if you look at his legacy and the way he carried himself, always a smile, always had time for people who had an idea but didn't necessarily know how to see that idea come to fruition. He was certainly there to assist. So Tom Mcbride, I believe he was 72 years old, and our community is better for having had him here since the mid 1970s, and he will be remembered.
In a broader general way here, you mentioned that he wasn't looking for the spotlight, and I think some of the people we have talked about will continue to recognize going forward in this spot at the end of the show. Many people in the community will go, I never heard of that person. And I mean, that in itself isn't a tribute, because if you're doing this, doing your work in the community for the right reason, you're not trying to attract attention. There's so many people in this community who quietly contribute, and I have so much respect for that, because they're doing it for all the right reasons.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. It wasn't about ego. It was about doing the right thing. And I think he was very successful in his own right in his, financial services based practice. But certainly he was somebody who had the ability, had the knowledge, and figured out what his strength was, and then looked at how he could sort of parlay that or collaborate with other people with other talents. And I think that'll be his greatest gift. I think he will be remembered. I wouldn't be surprised if there will be something named in his honor, and I would suggest that would be a wise decision, and perhaps an opportunity to tell his story better now that he's gone, for generations in the future to know how our city got to be where it is in a number of those institutions. Mike, we're at the end of the show, but I think it was a terrific show and a terrific opportunity to share. As always, it's great to work with you, and I look forward to our next show, where we will certainly ruffle some feathers and offer some opinions, and maybe get some opinions from other people who are experts in their field. So to everyone watching at home, thanks for joining us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we will see you again next time.
Take care.